Hi, friends. It's Sarah. So, this is going to be another one of those videos where I talk about body stuff and weight stuff. So, if you're not in a place to participate in that right now, that's good. Take care of yourself. If you are, this is going to be a little uncomfortable still, but sometimes discomfort is, it's uncomfortable for me. Let's be uncomfortable together. Maybe we'll, you know, learn something or whatever. Um, so I want to address a particular kind of comment I get. I'm going to use one example. But you may have noticed that I have a habit on videos like on this sort of topic where I will put a pinned comment where I say that you do not have my consent to talk about my body or my health, and I delete those who do. And I know it's just a boundary that I have that I think is important. And I am going to explain in this video why I have that boundary. Um, I don't need to explain. Nobody needs to explain why they have a boundary, but I am choosing to. I am going to use for this comment I received on the Taylor Swift video that I think is one of the less rude and but a good exemplar of you know what I'm talking about. If you have the gall to say we can't critique you and your body, you have no right to critique her art. Art is an expression and feeling and isn't always positive and shouldn't be. Art is a reflection of life and negative things happen. I don't like Taylor Swift, but she has every right to make the art she wants, especially if it is in relation to her own self experience. If you were genuinely comfortable and confident in who you are, you wouldn't let things bother you. But since you do, maybe you need some self reflection of your own. Well, look, I'm doing the self reflection. Minimalizing other people's struggles just because they hurt you to see is wrong, and limiting speech is wrong. Stop being a stereotype. Okay, for the record, disagree with the statement limiting speech is wrong. I'm not a free speech fundamentalist. I think that you have the right to say whatever you want, but not everywhere, and you do not have freedom from consequences. When I am on the bus or out on the street and some asshole yells at me that I'm a whale or whatever, I can't remove the guy from the bus or the street. Those are public spaces, and that's what it is. If someone came into my home and said in my living room those sorts of things, then I would obviously ask them to leave. And if they did not leave, I would seek ways to make them leave. That is my right because that is my space. This channel is somewhere in between the living room and the public space, but it is much closer to my living room. And if you come in here and say things to me about my body, I have the right to remove them and you. Also, I also have a responsibility because there are other people who come into this space and, given the things I'm talking about, open themselves up vulnerably. And I do not want them to see you say such things to me because they might look like me, they may look bigger than me. And I don't want them to see, you know, they deal with it on the street every day too. So I'm going to limit what's here. And particularly that video was also discussing the issues of eating disorders, and that is a very sensitive topic. You have to treat it with sensitively because there is a lot of potential danger. And that, for the record, was the main thrust of that discussion for me, was that that I felt there that Ms. Swift had not been as responsible as need be about presenting, about being careful of the context in which those images were presented, because there were publicity still sent out. And, there needed to be content warning and that sort of thing. That was that was the main thrust of argument. It wasn't like, oh, she should never make this. I draw a distinction between making something and how you present it to the world, how you publish it. And the reason that I make those distinctions is because critiquing is about choice. You can critique someone for the choices they make. And you're not like you're critiquing their choices. I am very clear. I do not like to criticize people. I like to criticize behaviors and choices. Sometimes, there are some people I think that, and it becomes a point where you have to criticize the person. But I'm not in that. I certainly wasn't doing that with Miss Smith. I don't know enough about her to do that. But yeah, critiquing is about choices. Why did the artist choose this color? Why did the artist choose to do this in this particular way? And again, it is always about the people who make the choices. So it matters that she was the director and is in charge of all the aspects of production on that. Whereas, for example, I've gotten a lot of fun criticisms on my 7 of 9 video because people thought I was critiquing Jerry Ryan for her choice of costume when I was critiquing the costume, which means I was critiquing the production team and the costume team that made a series of choices to put her into that costume. And it's the same when I talk about the fat suits. There's people with power who make a series of choices. The actor is usually the one with the least power, unless they are a star, which, yeah, it's a complicated, there's a complicated level at which they become a person with more power in that situation. But most of the time, when I'm critiquing art and story, I'm critiquing the people who made story choices, the people who made the production choices. It is all about critiquing choices. That is not the same as critiquing my body. Because here is the thing. No matter what narrative you think, no matter what you have been taught, my body is not a choice. My body being fat is not a choice. There are choices that went into me being the way I am. Some of those choices were mine. A lot of the choices were not. There was also a whole bunch of complicated stuff about epigenetics and medications and various various stuff that go into how I became this. It's not a simple yes, I think I shall be fat. And when I say that a lot of the choices were other people's, I don't mean that anybody went, we shall make her fat. I mean that people made choices with the information that they had at the time and thought that putting a young child on a diet was a good idea. It wasn't, or gym teachers thought it was a good idea to bully the fat child. Okay, that one, I'm not forgiving of. But yeah, there was choices that were made either out of unconscious bias or in some cases conscious bias. And nobody at any point along the way went, Zara shall be fat. I am choosing this. And I certainly never made that choice. You may think that I wake up every day and go, I shall stay fat. I don't. That's just not how it works. It's not how any of it works. To talk a little bit about my own experience, because it's the experience a lot of people have. I've been fat pretty much my whole life. I was a chubby cheeked little kid. And I was an awkward kid who didn't exercise well and didn't sleep well. And these are the reasons behind some of these things. And I got put on diets at a very young age. And that is a really, really bad idea. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, the sort of height of all this crap. And As a result, I have a really broken relationship with food. And of course, and in my teens, I did go through a period of restrictive eating, you know, stuff like that. And so I have, been on diets a large portion of my life. I have probably lost more weight than I think I've lost more weight than I weigh. I've certainly lost more than you weigh. Um, but it always happens the same way. It works if I am absolutely obsessive, particularly because my ADHD has to be like absolutely obsessive. That is untenable. It is also untenable to eat like, around 1,000 calories a day. It's our bodies just don't function very well like that. Um, but I would lose weight, even drastic amounts, and then it would stop. And then no matter how dedicated I was to sticking with the plan, the weight would come back. And there's a point where it coming back gets discouraging, and you're just kind of like, fuck it, because it is not reasonable to live like that. Like, there's a lot of aspects of life I missed out on because I was treating losing weight as, you know, my entire, as like a second job, um, or like more important than my job. Like I missed out on building careers and relationships, and I've lost friendships, and I've, you know, have a not great relationship with food. Trying to stuff I'm all trying to heal on. Because when you sacrifice everything to the altar of trying to be smaller, it will literally take everything and you will still not get smaller. Because the reality is, almost everything I've ever done to be smaller, I have ended up in worse health and often bigger. I if I was given a wish by a jinn, would I choose to be a thin person? No. Um, but I would wish to be in the body that I would have had if I'd never dieted. Because boy, would that be a healthier body. Still fat, probably. But not this fat with less problems with the joints and the guts, and then they have all the other fun stuff. But we don't get, never make wishes with gins because there's always a downside. But even if with like the best circumstances, we don't get magic wands, we don't get wishes. So the reality is my body is what it is. There is a bit of it's one of those finger trap things where the more you pull, you just can't escape and you just have to sort of push. So like the choice that I have made is to not make myself miserable, trying to sacrificing everything in my life to the altar of trying to be smaller and failing and failing and failing. I have instead chosen to live my life, get a degree, and work on building, doing this work, trying to build, you know, a career if, if possible. And yeah, I choose to live my life. That is the choice that I'm making. I'm not choosing to be fat. I'm choosing not to be miserable. And you can, if you think that I have made the wrong choice, you could keep that to yourself. And I guarantee you that you do not, if you think you have the miracle cure that I have not tried, you can keep that to yourself because you are wrong. I know more about my experience than you. And my experience is not uncommon. 90 some percent of all diets fail. And it's not because we don't try, it's because it's not possible. Most people gain the weight back. Some, like me, gain more. Um, and some do, you know, hit the jackpot and stay smaller. Sometimes that's because they are have to be obsessive. And that's their choice. Not my choice. Because again, I don't have that choice because my body doesn't do that. Um, and I think we have this narrative that losing weight is something you can choose to do. And I think that part of that is because there's many of the people in the world who are formerly fat were fat children who lost weight at puberty because that does happen because that's one of the times that the body actually does change. Puberty, menopause, second puberty. If you have one like this, that's when the body actually does change. So, that actually, a lot of people have this narrative that they, you know, did something right at that point and that, you know, losing weight is some kind of virtue or being thin is some kind of virtue. It's not, it's all luck. And, we just have the bodies that we have. And yeah, ultimately, it is not a choice. And that's why you can't critique me and why it isn't the same as saying I can critique art and you can't critique my body. For the record, also, as to you, I didn't say you can't critique me. I welcome, in that very video, I said I welcome criticism of me as how I do this work if I get something wrong. Because I want to learn and do better because we all have unconscious biases. So yeah, I didn't say you can't critique me. I said you can't critique my body. And you can't. Well, you can, but you're an asshole and I will block you. The second part of this delightful comment from this person, they say, if you were genuinely comfortable and confident in who you are, you wouldn't let things bother you. But since you do, maybe you need some self reflection of your own. The self reflection that, as I said, I am now doing. Um, I am not totally confident in who I am. Are you? Have you met someone who is? Did they scare you? Because they kind of scare me. I'm like I am I'm just a person. And I don't subscribe to the notion that we have to feel 100% good about ourselves before we can um speak about anything. I mean, I think that's stupid. It sort of gets into toxic positivity. If you just love yourself enough, then things won't bother you. No, that seems like I don't know, that seems like a strange standard. I mean, we are all working on trying to like ourselves more. Um, like that's one of those journeys of personhood. Um, and I'm not going to wait until I have hit some magical level of self confidence before I speak. I just choose to speak anyway. And when I was speaking on that video, and most of my videos, with the exception of the one about the whale, I wasn't speaking from a place of personal offense. I wasn't like, "Oh, I'm so hurt." Um, and it would not that there's anything wrong if you feel that. My area of interest is the narratives that we have about each other, particularly about marginalized people, and the way that those narratives shape the world. And so I was actually speaking from knowledge about you know a narrative that is harmful and dangerous. It is very dangerous to be um, incautious with narratives around eating disorders, um, just because there's a lot of potential for harm there. And there's harm that happens in the ways that society portrays marginalized people, and yes, fat people are marginalized people. These are important things to discuss. And I speak from knowledge and I speak from experience. So I am going to speak on those things. Um, Whether or not I feel, 100% comfortable in who I am, um, because I am confident that what I have to say is uh, of value because I am a person in the world, and what we all have to say is of value, particularly what we have to say about something that we have studied and something of which we have experience. Firsthand experience is valuable, and um, you're not going to get firsthand experience of what it's like to be being told that one's body is a problem and bad and a lifetime of what it's like to live in that experience. You're not going to get that from someone who is totally confident because um, the world has tried to rob us of that confidence. Like this is creating an impossible situation to have that impossible standard that you have to be unbothered by anything before you can speak on anything. Like, no, I have the right to speak, and people think that what I have to say is valid. You don't have to think that what I have to say is valid. There's this lovely little thing called not watching the video and not commenting on it because, yeah, um, you don't have to have an opinion about everything. And your opinion about everything doesn't have to be heard. So, yeah, I'm not going to wait until I feel perfectly confident about myself or until nothing bothers me before I speak on problems, because that is a stupid thing to ask. And yes, part of why I have a boundary where I say you can't comment on my body is because these comments can be hurtful. It really sucks sometimes to read these things. Um, and I am lucky enough to have friends with whom I can share them and we can laugh and, process it that way. And, I, yeah, I have tools from way too much time in counseling to sort of deal with them. But yeah, it's still gonna bug me. And yeah, uh, it's okay for me to say that that's not okay. It's actually important for me to say that it's not okay. That is a boundary I have. You cannot comment on my body, and I do not want your health advice. And while I'm on the subject, I am not ever going to be a person who wants thirst comments either. Um, like those kinds of comments on my body or my looks aren't really. Yeah, I um, am not a person who feels comfortable with those kinds of comments from strangers. If you want to compliment me, complimenting something I chose, uh, my um, my makeup or hair or something like that, something that's a choice. I like, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, yeah, either for good or for bad. I don't when I I don't accept comments on my body. Some people appreciate those, but not me. So yeah, that's my sort of rambling discussion of that. I no hate to this person who left this comment, but I'm using them as an example because it's sort of a lot of bits of comments that other people have got. Sort of, we're all in that one. So they were a good example. Uh, but yeah, mostly I get nice comments, and I really appreciate when people share their thoughts and experiences. Um, so yeah, that is another kind of rambly video. Yeah, ultimately, as I said, my body is my business. This is more than I particularly like talking about my personal experience of it. You know, yeah, it is what it is. I try and get away from the sort of. I think we kind of went too far with Descartes' sort of binary, bringing in the sort of binary idea of body and mind split. We didn't, before Descartes, we didn't actually think of things that way. People tended to think of them as more of a singular unit. And I think, um, me, I kind of think it's more like a cluster of things. But, a lot of us have been taught to see a split between our bodies and our minds and feel like we're at war with our bodies. And, we get the sort of the overly positive narrative that we have to love ourselves completely and that'll magically make everything better, which usually also translates into thinking if you love your body enough, it'll change and you'll get thin. Um, but I don't know. I am not going. I don't think I'm ever going to be like, "Ooh, body happy, yay!" And just kind of like making peace with it and sort of trying to get away from the sort of binary thinking of it is this separate thing that like contains my brain, but more like, I am a cluster of things, which includes physical things and mental things. Like, it isn't really a separate thing from myself that I'm at war with. It just is me. That's what I'm working on. Yeah, we're all works in progress, but I just choose to work on something that actually makes progress of, you know, um, making peace with myself, figuring out my life, and I don't want to waste time on a fool's errand of trying to make myself smaller. It doesn't work. So yeah, that is all I think I'll say on that subject for now. So anyway, uh kind of another ramble, but hopefully it makes some sense as to why I have this particular boundary. And even if it doesn't fully make sense to you, I hope that you will respect it. And if you don't, then you might get blocked. Boundaries are very important for self care. And I will, I will, I choose to care for myself by maintaining my boundaries. And I hope that you do too. So, yeah, that's it from me. As always, thank you to my patrons. Um, you can support me on Patreon if you want. I have a tier as low as $1 because I know some people can't afford to give much, but it's if you can give something, that would be good. And yeah, uh, watch this channel for more. And you can, as long as Twitter survives, you can find me on Twitter at BlueStockingZara. And if you do join my Patreon, I have a Discord that is welcome to everyone at any tier, even including $1. So, yeah, um, that is it for me now.